A free speech group has called on Syracuse University to drop an investigation into a chemistry professor who referred to the virus that causes the COVID-19 disease as Chinese Communist Party virus and Wuhan flu in his course syllabus. On August the 25th, Syracuse University, a private college in New York State, announced that it had placed a professor on administrative leave pending an investigation for using derogatory language in a course syllabus that was damaging to the learning environment for students. The school said the wording was offensive to Chinese, international and Asian Americans everywhere who have experienced hate speech, rhetoric and actions since the pandemic began. The professor in question is John Zubieta, who has taught chemistry at the college for 30 years. Underneath a section heading of the syllabus titled Special Notices Related to the COVID-19 Pandemic, he included, in parenthesis, Wuhan flu or Chinese Communist Party virus. Photos of the syllabus circulated on social media, prompting an outcry among some students. Zubieta said in a statement released by non-profit Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, "My intention was to mock the euphemistic conventions of PC culture rather than the Chinese people or their great heritage and traditions. The actions of the university in placing me under suspension and in practice seemingly supporting the accusations of racism and xenophobia are deeply disturbing." FIRE said that the university is investigating Zubieta for inappropriate conduct, hostile work environment and discrimination. On September the 22nd, FIRE wrote to Syracuse University Chancellor Kent Syverud, urging to cancel the investigation and reinstate Zubieta. The group said that though the university isn't bound by the First Amendment because it's a private institution, it should fulfill its own policies that espouse a commitment to free speech. Zach Greenberg, author of the letter and a program officer at FIRE, told the Epoch Times, "If you're going to promise your professors free speech, academic freedom rights, you have to uphold those promises, even when it's difficult or unpopular to do." Greenberg said that Zubieta had received many messages online calling for him to be fired. The chemistry professor has been, from all accounts, a model employee, Greenberg said, noting that prior to this incident, Zubieta had never had any misconduct cases or allegations of misconduct made against him in his 3 decades at the university. Greenberg said that while universities are free to publicly condemn hate speech, bigotry and xenophobia, FIRE's position is that the answer to distasteful, hateful speech is more speech. It's not censorship or violence, or in this case, firing professors. While some Chinese students at Syracuse have expressed being offended at Zubieta's descriptors of the pandemic, one Chinese student from nearby Buffalo University recently penned a letter decrying Syracuse's move. On September the 14th, Liu Tianyu, a graduate student at Buffalo's history department, wrote in a letter to the editor that was published on the school newspaper The Spectrum, saying, "As a native Chinese, I do not feel offended when I heard these words." The student said that many Chinese people use the words Wuhan flu and Chinese Communist Party virus, noting that earlier in the pandemic, Chinese people commonly referred to the outbreak as the Wuhan flu, before the Chinese regime prohibited its usage. Liu also wrote that the Chinese Communist Party suppressed doctors from sounding the alarm about the outbreak in the early stages, worsening the disease's spread. He wrote, "The 2 words, Wuhan flu and Chinese Communist Party virus, easily remind people of the shortcomings of the Communist Party system, and that is the reason that the Chinese Communist Party forbids people to use it." Liu, in an interview with the Epoch Times, said he was very surprised when he first saw the news about Zubieta's case. He said, "If this happens in mainland China, a professor being fired for saying CCP virus, that would simply be a common occurrence. People have grown numb to this. But I never expected that something like this could happen in the United States." Liu said that this initial surprise later morphed to anger. He believed Syracuse's decision amounted to punishing an individual for a speech crime, a move Liu described as a big mistake. Liu wrote the letter to the editor because he was worried something similar might happen at Buffalo University, he said. He said, "America, in my impression, is a country that values freedom of speech, and everyone should be able to freely express their thoughts. You shouldn't receive an administrative penalty for a mere word or sentence." He believed that the professor's expression did not amount to racial discrimination, as it was not directed against any racial group or other groups of students. Rather, it involved expressing concerns about the current Chinese regime's governance and criticism of the CCP's handling of the outbreak. Liu said he raised a personal opinion and perhaps he wants to use this to make people think more deeply about how this pandemic broke out and the virus's connection with the CCP system. Regardless, he has the right to express these views. The Epoch Times refers to the virus as the CCP virus, as explained in a March editorial. The word choice was to hold the Chinese regime accountable for its cover-up of the outbreak which led to the global spread of the disease. Syracuse University did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
The U.S. Immigration Service issued a policy alert that explicitly prohibits members of the Communist Party and its affiliated organizations from applying for green cards and naturalization. Commenters believe that it is forcing the CCP members who want to stay in the United States to choose sides, either cut ties with the CCP or leave the United States. On October 2nd, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, issued policy guidance in the USCIS Policy Manual to address inadmissibility based on membership in or affiliation with the Communist Party or any other totalitarian party. It states that membership in or affiliation with the Communist Party or any other totalitarian party is inconsistent and incompatible with the naturalization oath of allegiance to the United States of America, which includes pledging to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States. The policy manual guidance also states that in general, unless otherwise exempt, any immigrant who is or has been a member of or affiliated with the Communist or any other totalitarian party, domestic or foreign, is inadmissible to the United States. This ground of inadmissibility only applies to aliens seeking immigration status, such as aliens inside the United States applying to adjust status to that of a lawful permanent resident. The New York lawyer Yenning pointed out that after the end of the Cold War, the United States started to attach little importance to the laws and regulations against the Communist Party and communism, including the Communist Control Act. The immigration law actually has restrictions on the members of the Communist Party and its affiliated organizations. For example, when applying for a green card and citizenship, they will ask you if you're a member of the Communist Party.
There was this question for B1 and B2 visas. When President Obama was serving his second term, this question was gone. There was no such question for tourist visas. Now Article 212 of the immigration law has been frozen again.
Yenning added that there are some exemptions in Article 212 of the immigration law, including for those forced to join the Communist Party. If you don't join the party, you will be put in jail or restricted from grain and cooking oil rations. Yenning believes that those who were once Communist Party members that now want to stay in the United States must take the initiative. For example, go to the Global Service Center for quitting the Chinese Communist Party and get a certificate of quitting the party. Then send a copy of the certificate of withdrawal from the party to the former work unit by registered mail. This shows an effort to actively reject the Communist Party.
You have to be able to prove to the Department of Homeland Security that you have quit the Chinese Communist Party through your own proactive actions. Through this, you can still adjust your status, get a green card, or obtain U.S. citizenship through naturalization.
Yenning also said that this policy will also affect those who got the green card or citizenship by concealing their status as CCP members. It was a fraud. Those people also need to take proactive actions.
We recently heard that the Department of Homeland Security has set up a special task force to review cases of concealed identity for CCP members obtaining citizenship.
In fact, the United States has already had plans to prohibit the entry of CCP members. On September 17th, the father of a Chinese-American citizen was refused entry by U.S. Customs when trying to enter the United States at Detroit Airport on a tourist visa because he is a CCP member. His visa was canceled and he was deported. Xing Tianxing, a current affairs commentator in the United States, said that the United States is now forcing immigrants to make a choice. If you want to stay in the United States, you must abandon the CCP and cut ties with the CCP.
This is a corresponding measure taken by the United States to protect its own national security. It now truly recognizes that the Communist Party is its greatest, most harmful enemy, so this policy is aimed at the Communist Party.
Xing believes that the U.S. is issuing this policy to the world to clearly say no to the communist forces. Not long ago, White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro called the COVID-19 pandemic a product of the Chinese Communist Party for the first time as an official statement. He also stated that the strongest and most resilient economy in American history, established by President Trump, was hit by the CCP. On October 1st, U.S. Representative Scott Perry introduced legislation to add the Chinese Communist Party to the top international crime organizations target list and provide United States law enforcement agencies a strategic directive to target the CCP's malign activity. CCP officials, whether in mainland China or in the United States, must be punished for crimes such as human rights violations. Xing Tianxing pointed out that the confrontation between the United States and China is a contest between good and evil. Now, many American officials have realized that the CCP, just like Satan, is out to destroy the lives and values of normal people.
Both China Central Television, CCTV, and China Global Television Network, CGTN, recently claimed that the WHO's chief scientist, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, said China's COVID-19 vaccines are effective. However, a Hong Kong group proved that her statement was edited and taken out of context. On its Chinese language version of Facebook account, CCTV alleges that the WHO expert spoke of China's very active COVID-19 vaccine development program, saying several of their vaccine candidates are in advanced stages of clinical trial, so this is also of interest to us. So we're following those very closely. Some of their candidates actually proved to be successful in the clinical trials that are going on. Fact Check Lab, a Hong Kong-based independent fact-checking agency, traced Swaminathan's original words. After a word-by-word comparison, it concluded that what she expressed was completely different from the CCTV report. In fact, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan was arguing
with them, and they have always been reiterating their commitment to global access if some of their candidates actually prove to be successful in the clinical trials that are going on.
CCTV is China's biggest state-backed national TV station and is widely known as the main CCP mouthpiece. CGTN, a Beijing-based international English-language news channel, is owned by CCTV and controlled by the CCP Publicity Department. Its satellite signals are received in over 100 countries. The United States Department of State designated it a foreign mission and registered it as a foreign agent in February 2020. The Chinese government is preparing to launch an antitrust probe into Google over alleged market monopoly of its Android operating system, which Beijing claims has caused huge losses to Chinese tech companies such as Huawei. According to two insiders, analysts believe that Beijing is trying to accuse Google of monopoly despite blocking numerous Google apps inside China, in apparent political retaliation. In an article dated September 30th, Reuters quoted two insiders who revealed that the case was proposed by Huawei last year and has been submitted by China's top market regulator to the State Council's Antitrust Committee for review. According to one of the insiders, a decision on whether to proceed with a formal investigation may come as soon as October and could be affected by the state of China's relationship with the United States. U.S.-based Chinese commentator Tang Jingyuan said that the U.S. sanctions on Huawei have caused a heavy blow to Huawei, and the antitrust investigation is obviously an act of retaliation. On the other hand, Huawei proposed this investigation last year, but Beijing did not take any formal action until recently, indicating that the CCP is in a dilemma.
If Beijing had launched its retaliatory suppression of foreign companies last year, it would inevitably prompt foreign companies to move their industrial chains out of China, which will bring a loss of capital and technology to the Chinese regime. Now that China has been facing a continuous technological war and decoupling from the United States, if the CCP does not take any retaliatory action, it would fear appearing to be blameworthy or cowardly.
The potential investigation comes as China embarks on a major revamp of its antitrust laws with proposed amendments, including a dramatic increase in maximum fines and expanded criteria for judging a company's control of a market, Reuters reported. The other insider revealed that a potential probe would also look at accusations that Google's market position could cause extreme damage to Chinese companies like Huawei, as losing Google's support for Android-based operating systems will lead to loss of confidence and revenue. U.S.-based freelance journalist Zhang Mingdao believes that the CCP is being irrational by accusing Google of monopoly, since Google's search engine, Gmail, and other apps are blocked inside China.
If you claim that Google is overbearing on China's market and suppressing its competitors, filing the complaint makes sense. However, Google currently has no market in China. Isn't it ridiculous if you claim Google is monopolizing? The situation is, you want to use other companies' technology, but you were rejected. How could that be called monopoly? Why do other companies have to grant you the right to use their stuff?
At present, most Chinese smartphone suppliers use the Android open source version developed by Google and install domestically developed apps in place of Google apps. Huawei announced earlier that it plans to introduce the self-developed Harmony OS system in its smartphones next year to solve the problem of over-reliance on Google.
In fact, most of Google's products, including most of its popular apps, are blocked on the Chinese market. How can China blame Google for monopoly? For mobile phones made in China, the manufacturers use the open-source Android system. This is their own choice. Google does not have any mandatory requirements. Even for Huawei, Google is just complying with the U.S. government's ban. It will not provide Huawei with the updates to the Android system, and the older versions already installed will not be affected.
Some analysts believe that China's plan to probe Google at Huawei's request is meant to drive the Android system out of China's cell phone market, forcing other Chinese cell phone manufacturers to use Harmony OS to help Huawei survive. As a matter of fact, a number of U.S. tech giants, including Google, were already subjected to regulatory antitrust investigations in the United States and Europe in recent years. The first insider revealed that Chinese regulators will reference their peers in Europe and in India if they proceed with the antitrust investigation. However, Tang Jinyuan believed that China's antitrust investigation is going to be very different in nature from that of the free world.
Within the American market and European Union market, Google has indeed formed a technology monopoly and an industry monopoly with its dominant market share. Both the United States and the European Union are free markets and advocate free competition. Google's monopoly has played a negative role in free competition. However, the so-called antitrust probe to be launched by the CCP is nothing more than a political retaliation against American companies and, in essence, a retaliation against the U.S. government.
At press time, China's State Administration of Market Supervision and the State Council had not made any comments in response to the news.